The night was eerily silent. Not a single insect chirped, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The village elders always warned against venturing into the woods after sunset, but Adam and his friends thought it was nothing more than an old wives' tale meant to scare children. That night, they decided to prove the elders wrong. Armed with only a few flashlights and a sense of bravado fueled by their youthful arrogance, they set off into the forbidden woods. The air grew colder with each step, and a heavy feeling settled over them, pressing into their chests like an unseen force. "I don't think we should be here," whispered Lily, her voice barely audible. "Come on, it's just a forest." Adam scoffed, but even he couldn't ignore the creeping dread slithering up his spine. As they walked deeper, the trees seemed to close in around them. Shadows danced eerily in the dim glow of their flashlights. Then, they heard it, a whisper. Faint and almost melodic, yet chilling to the bone. It was calling a name, though none of them could understand the words. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "It's just the wind," Adam said, though doubt tainted his words. Then, the whisper turned into a low, menacing growl. Suddenly, their flashlights flickered, and an overwhelming sense of being watched fell upon them. Something moved in the darkness. Something large. Then, Lily screamed. What they saw next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The night was eerily silent. Not a single insect chirped, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The village elders always warned against venturing into the woods after sunset, but Adam and his friends thought it was nothing more than an old wives' tale meant to scare children. That night, they decided to prove the elders wrong. Armed with only a few flashlights and a sense of bravado fueled by their youthful arrogance, they set off into the forbidden woods. The air grew colder with each step, and a heavy feeling settled over them, pressing into their chests like an unseen force. "I don't think we should be here," whispered Lily, her voice barely audible. "Come on, it's just a forest," Adam scoffed, but even he couldn't ignore the creeping dread slithering up his spine. As they walked deeper, the trees seemed to close in around them. Shadows danced eerily in the dim glow of their flashlights. Then, they heard it, a whisper. Faint and almost melodic, yet chilling to the bone. It was calling a name, though none of them could understand the words. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "It's just the wind," Adam said, though doubt tainted his words. Then, the whisper turned into a low, menacing growl. Suddenly, their flashlights flickered, and an overwhelming sense of being watched fell upon them. Something moved in the darkness. Something large. Then, Lily screamed. What they saw next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A pair of glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, locked onto them like a predator assessing its prey. The figure was tall and shrouded in a black mist, its form shifting as if it wasn't entirely part of this world. Adam felt his legs freeze in place, his breath hitching in his throat. "Run!" Jake shouted, but their feet refused to move. The figure let out a guttural sound, like the groaning of a dying man. It took a step forward, and with that, an unbearable pressure filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Lily clutched Adam's arm, her fingers digging into his skin. Then, as if breaking a spell, Adam yanked Lily's arm and bolted. The others followed, their panic driving them deeper into the woods. Branches scratched their faces, roots threatened to trip them, but they didn't dare stop. The whispers surrounded them now, coming from every direction. It was no longer just one voice, it was many, overlapping, calling, taunting. The air turned icy, and their breath came out in visible puffs. Just as Adam thought they had lost whatever was chasing them, he tripped over something. Hitting the ground hard, his flashlight flew from his hand, rolling a few feet away. He scrambled to grab it, and when he did, he shone it in front of him, a gravestone. The name carved into it sent a jolt of horror through his body. It was his own name. A chilling laugh echoed around them, and the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The whispers grew into screams, and the trees seemed to shift, forming an unnatural barrier around them. "We have to get out." Lily sobbed, pulling at Adam. Jake and the others grabbed him, yanking him to his feet. They ran blindly, pushing through the dense forest until they finally stumbled onto the village road. As soon as they stepped out, the air changed. The night was still, the eerie whispers gone, panting and drenched in cold sweat, they turned back towards the woods. Nothing. Just trees swaying gently in the wind. As if nothing had happened, but Adam knew better. They all did. The village elders weren't just telling stories. The warning had been real, and now, something had followed them back. The night after their horrifying escape from the forbidden woods, Adam couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the whispers, the glowing red eyes, and most of all, the gravestone with his name on it. He sat by his window, staring at the dark tree line in the distance, half expecting to see those eerie eyes peering back at him. A sudden knock on his bedroom door made him jump. "Adam? Are you awake?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. He rushed to open the door. Lily stood there, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "I heard them," she said, her voice trembling. "The whispers. They're in my house." Adam felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He let her in and locked the door behind her. "What did you hear?" he asked cautiously. "At first, it was just murmurs. But then, they started saying my name. Over and over again. And then, something touched my shoulder, but when I turned, no one was there." Adam swallowed hard. He had barely managed to convince himself that what happened in the woods was just a trick of the mind. But now, it was following them home. A loud crash from downstairs made them both freeze. Adam grabbed the nearest object, a heavy book from his desk, and motioned for Lily to stay behind him. They tiptoed down the stairs, their hearts hammering in their chests. The living room was dark, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Something moved in the shadows. Adam flicked on the light. Nothing. The room was exactly as it should be. Then the whispering began. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Faint, raspy voices slithered through the air, just out of reach of comprehension. The hairs on Adam's arms stood on end. He turned to Lily, who was clutching his arms so tightly her nails were digging into his skin. Then, the television flickered on by itself. Static filled the screen, the volume growing louder by the second. Then, the static cleared, a face appeared. It was distorted, pale, with hollow black eyes staring directly at them. Its mouth moved, but the whispers continued, rising in intensity. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, the figure on the screen turned its head to the side, as if listening to something behind it. Adam felt a cold breath against his neck. He spun around. Nothing. But the whispers were inside the room now. Lily let out a strangled scream as the lights flickered violently. The room seemed to close in on them, the air thick with something unseen but undoubtedly malevolent. Then, as suddenly as it started, the whispers stopped, the television screen went black. The room was silent. Adam and Lily stood frozen, their breaths shallow. Then, a single phrase appeared on the TV screen, written in jagged, blood-red letters: "You shouldn't have left." Their blood ran cold. Whatever they had encountered in the forbidden woods had followed them home, and it wasn't done with them yet. The nightmares started that very night. Adam jolted awake, drenched in sweat, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The whispers hadn't stopped. In fact, they had gotten worse. He could still hear them, low, incomprehensible murmurs slithering through his mind like venomous snakes. It was past midnight, and the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. He turned to check his phone, but the screen was frozen, static, just like the television earlier. A wave of dread crept over him. Something was wrong. Then, he noticed it, a shadow, darker than the night itself. Standing just outside his window, his breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't his imagination. The shadow was real. Its shape was human-like but elongated, its form shifting and pulsating as if it were made of liquid darkness. It had no discernible face, yet Adam could feel it watching him. Studying him. A cold chill seeped into the room as Adam slowly reached for his phone. His fingers trembled as he tried to turn on the flashlight. But before he could, the shadow moved, sudden and unnaturally fast. One moment, it was outside his window. The next, it was inside his room. Adam scrambled back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The darkness in his room thickened, swallowing every corner. He tried to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. The whispers surrounded him once more, growing louder, more insistent. They weren't just whispers anymore, they were voices. You left us. You shouldn't have left. You brought it back. The shadow lunged, a searing pain shot through Adam's skull as a cold, claw-like grip wrapped around his wrist. His vision blurred, the world around him warping. He could feel himself being pulled, into the darkness, into the void. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Adam gasped, his body drenched in sweat. He was no longer in his room. He was standing in the woods again, the forbidden woods. The gravestone was in front of him, his name etched deep into the stone, and this time, the dirt beneath it was disturbed, as if something had crawled out. A hollow, rasping breath echoed behind him. He wasn't alone, the shadow had followed him, and it was hungry. Adam's breathing was ragged as he stumbled backward, his mind screaming for him to wake up. This had to be a nightmare. He had to still be in his bed. But the cold, damp earth beneath his feet told him otherwise. The gravestone in front of him seemed more sinister than before. The disturbed soil beneath it looked like a wound in the earth, as though something had clawed its way free. Adam's instinct screamed at him to run. But his body remained frozen in place. Then he heard it, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate, they echoed through the empty forest. Though there was no one in sight, Adam turned his head sharply, scanning the darkness. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their twisted branches forming grotesque shapes against the dim moonlight. The sound of footsteps grew louder, but there was still no visible source. A chill ran down his spine. It was as if something unseen was walking toward him. Then, he felt a breath against his ear. You brought it back. Adam whirled around, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. But there was no one there, the forest was empty. Yet the footsteps continued. He turned on his heel and ran, pushing through the undergrowth, branches clawing at his clothes like desperate hands trying to pull him back. The whispers returned, rising and falling with the rhythm of his frantic steps. He didn't dare look back. He reached the edge of the woods and broke into the clearing behind his house. The porch light flickered dimly in the distance, a beacon of safety. Adam sprinted for it, his lungs burning. The footsteps behind him quickened. Just as he reached the door, a shadow shot past him, a rush of icy air sending him sprawling onto the wooden porch. The door creaked open slightly, as if inviting him inside. Adam scrambled to his feet. His body trembling, and slammed the door shut behind him, locking it tight. Silence. His house was dark and still. But the sense of unease didn't leave him. Then, the footsteps began again, this time inside the house, coming from upstairs. Adam's breath caught in his throat. His legs refused to move. He wanted to believe it was his imagination, but he knew better. The sound was unmistakable. The slow, deliberate creaking of floorboards under heavy steps. Someone, or something, was in the house with him, and it was getting closer. Adam barely slept that night. The footsteps had faded, but the dread in his chest remained like a weight pressing down on him. The next morning, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steaming cup of coffee in his hands, trying to convince himself that it had all been in his imagination. But deep down, he knew better. He needed answers. He grabbed his phone and dialed the only person who might know something about what was happening, his grandmother. She answered after a few rings. Adam? What's wrong? You sound shaken. He hesitated before speaking. Grandma, did Grandpa ever mention something strange about this house? Or the forest? There was silence on the other end. Then, in a hushed voice, she said, You found it, didn't you? Adam's blood ran cold. Found what? The relic, she whispered. I begged your grandfather to get rid of it years ago. But he wouldn't. He thought it was just superstition. Adam's grip tightened around the phone. Where is it? It should be buried behind the house. Near the old well. But listen to me, Adam, if you've disturbed it, you must put it back. Now. Before it's too late. A chill ran down his spine. He ended the call and rushed outside, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. The well stood like a forgotten sentinel at the edge of the backyard, its bricks covered in moss. He grabbed a shovel from the shed and started digging. Minutes passed. Then, with a dull clink, the shovel hit something solid. His heart pounded as he unearthed a small wooden box, its surface carved with intricate symbols. He could feel the darkness radiating from it, an unnatural energy that made his skin crawl. Then, the whispers returned, louder this time. He wasn't alone. Adam turned sharply, his breath catching in his throat. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. Its hollow eyes were fixed on him, and it was smiling. Adam's breath caught in his throat as the figure at the edge of the woods remained motionless, its hollow eyes locked onto him. The relic in his hands felt heavier than before, as if it were resisting his grip. Then, without warning, the figure moved, slow, deliberate steps toward him, its feet barely touching the ground. Panic surged through Adam's veins. He stumbled backward, gripping the wooden box tightly. The whispers around him swelled into a chorus, unintelligible but insistent, like a warning that he had crossed a boundary he should have never approached. Then, the world around him changed, the trees that surrounded his house twisted and blurred, the sky above darkening unnaturally fast. A thick, oppressive fog rolled in, swallowing everything in its path. When Adam turned toward his house, it was gone. In its place stood an old, decayed village, silent, abandoned, and eerie in its stillness. Adam's breath hitched. This wasn't possible. He was standing in his backyard just moments ago. But now he was somewhere else entirely. A flickering lantern light appeared in one of the distant cottages, and before he could decide whether to run or hide, a shadowy figure emerged from the doorway. Unlike the one at the woods, this one seemed human. A frail old man, draped in ragged clothes, his face worn with age and something darker, suffering. "You shouldn't be here." The man rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. Adam swallowed hard. "Where am I?" The old man glanced at the box in Adam's hands, his expression turning grim. "You brought it here. You've awakened them." "Awakened what?" Before the old man could answer, a shrill, unearthly cry pierced the air. The very ground beneath Adam trembled as shadows slithered from the alleyways between the houses, unnatural figures moving with inhuman grace. The villagers, what was left of them, were waking up, and they were hungry. The village was no longer silent. Shadows flickered between the ruined buildings, whispering in a language Adam couldn't understand. The old man grabbed his arm, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "We must move. Now." Adam hesitated but followed as the man led him through the village's narrow, crumbling alleys. The air was thick with decay, and the cries from the shadows grew louder with each passing second. "Who are they?" Adam whispered. "The lost ones. Those who stayed behind when the village disappeared." They stopped at the edge of a small courtyard. A dried-up fountain stood in the center, and at its base lay a single object, a doll, its porcelain face cracked, its once white dress stained with age. "She was the first," the old man murmured, his voice filled with sorrow. Adam frowned. "Who?" "The girl in the white dress." A sudden chill swept through the air. And Adam turned sharply. At the far end of the courtyard stood a figure, a young girl, barely 10 years old. Her dress, tattered and dirt-streaked, still carried the remnants of its former purity. Long, black hair covered most of her face, but he could see her lips moving, whispering words he could not hear. "Don't look at her," the old man warned. "She sees those who see her." But it was too late. The girl's head snapped upward, and Adam met her gaze. Her eyes were hollow, endless pools of darkness. A sudden force struck him, sending him tumbling to the ground. The whispers grew deafening. The girl was no longer standing, she was floating, her body twisting unnaturally as she drew closer. Her lips parted, revealing jagged teeth, her whisper now a shriek that tore through the air. The last thing Adam saw before everything went black was her outstretched hand reaching for his throat. Adam awoke to the sound of rain tapping against a windowpane. He gasped for breath, his body aching as though he had been thrown against a wall. When he finally gathered the strength to sit up, he realized he was no longer in the cursed village. Instead, he was inside an old, decaying manor. The room was vast but suffocating, filled with broken furniture and cobwebs that clung to every surface. The air smelled of damp wood and something else, something rotten. Faint candlelight flickered from sconces along the walls, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. How did I get here? Adam whispered, his voice hoarse. A cold breeze swept through the room, making the flames dance wildly. The door creaked open, revealing a long hallway that stretched into darkness. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he stepped forward, drawn by an unseen force. The hallway was lined with old portraits, their subjects' faces shrouded in dust and shadow. But as Adam passed, he felt their eyes follow him, their expressions shifting in the flickering candlelight. He quickened his pace, his breath shallow, then he saw it, a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. Something about it felt wrong. As if whatever was behind it had been waiting for him. Summoning his courage, Adam pushed the door open. Inside was a grand ballroom, its once glorious chandeliers now draped in cobwebs. The floor was covered in dust, yet in the center stood a single figure, a woman in an old-fashioned gown, her back turned to him. Her dress, once elegant, was now tattered and stained. Her hair cascaded down her back in long, dark waves, but something about her posture sent a shiver through him. "Excuse me." Adam's voice barely carried through the vast room. The woman turned slowly, her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow and black. A twisted smile stretched across her lips as she raised a skeletal hand and pointed at him. A whisper filled the air. Not from her lips but from all around him. The portraits in the hallway, the shadows in the corners, everything whispered his name. Adam's body locked in place, unable to move. The woman's mouth opened, and from it came a guttural, inhuman wail that rattled the very walls of the manor. Then, the candles blew out, darkness swallowed him whole, the darkness pressed against Adam's skin like a living entity, wrapping him in a suffocating embrace. He scrambled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the eerie wail still echoed in his ears. The woman, if she could still be called that, was gone, but he knew she was not truly gone. The manor was alive with whispers, fumbling for a light. Adam's fingers found the cold metal of an old candelabrum. A single match sat beside it, miraculously dry despite the damp air. His hands trembled as he struck it, the flame casting long, wavering shadows across the ballroom. Something moved in the reflection of the cracked mirrors that lined the walls. He turned sharply, heart hammering, but nothing was there. And yet, in the mirror, he saw a figure standing behind him. The same woman. Her mouth still open, her whisper an unending curse that sent ice through his veins. "Who are you?" Adam managed to croak, his voice barely above a whisper. The mirror fogged as if something exhaled against it, and words formed on the glass. "You took my life. Now I take yours." Adam shook his head. "No, I don't even know you." The whispering grew louder. The walls shuddered, and the chandeliers above swayed violently, as though an invisible force was shaking the very foundation of the manor. Then, the doors slammed shut, panic surged through him. He ran to the nearest exit, but the handle was ice cold and wouldn't budge. Behind him, the mirror shattered, shards flying across the room as the whispers turned into a deafening shriek. A force slammed into his chest, knocking him to the ground. He struggled against the invisible grip, but it held him firm. The air turned suffocating, thick with the scent of decay and something older, something foul. Like a curse that had festered for centuries. Then, the voice spoke, not a whisper this time, but a deep, guttural growl that resonated from the very walls. "You will pay for what was done." Adam's vision blurred, darkness creeping at the edges of his sight. He was losing consciousness, slipping into whatever nightmare this phantom had planned for him, and then. A sound, a bell, it rang through the manor, clear and commanding, cutting through the suffocating presence like a blade. The pressure on Adam's chest lifted instantly, and he gasped, dragging in lungfuls of air. The shadows recoiled, and for the first time, he saw something new, a door at the far end of the ballroom. One he hadn't noticed before. With no other choice, he ran. Behind him, the whispers turned into a furious howl as the entity lashed out, trying to pull him back into the abyss. But Adam didn't stop. He pushed through the door and slammed it shut behind him. silence, he was in another room now. The air was different, less oppressive but still heavy with something unnatural. A grand study lay before him, filled with ancient books and a fireplace that burned without warmth. On the desk, an old journal lay open, and on its pages, written in the same ghostly handwriting as the mirror, were the words, "The bell tolls for those who seek vengeance." The forest was eerily quiet. Not a single insect chirped, no leaves rustled in the wind. It was as if the entire woodland held its breath, waiting. Elena gripped her flashlight tightly, its weak beam barely cutting through the thick fog that curled around the trees like ghostly tendrils. She knew she shouldn't be here, that no one ventured into these woods after dark. But something had drawn her in, a whisper, barely audible, calling her name. She had ignored the warnings, the tales passed down through generations. The Silent Woods, they called it. A place where voices vanished, where those who entered were never heard from again. But Elena had never been one to believe in ghost stories. A twig snapped behind her, she spun around, her breath hitching in her throat. Nothing. Just the dense wall of trees, their twisted limbs stretching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Then she heard it again. The whisper, "Elena." Her stomach clenched. The voice was familiar, painfully so. It was her brother's. Daniel had disappeared in these very woods 2 years ago. They had searched for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. The only thing left behind was his backpack, torn and covered in something dark, something that wasn't just dirt. "Elena. Help me." She took a shaky step forward, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Daniel?" Silence, then, a shadow moved between the trees. She ran. Her feet pounded against the damp earth, breath coming in short gasps. The fog thickened, blinding her, disorienting her. The trees seemed to shift, their positions changing, trapping her in a labyrinth of darkness. "Elena." The whisper was right behind her now. She turned, and there he was. Daniel stood just a few feet away, but he was wrong. His skin was too pale, his eyes sunken, lips curled in an unnatural grin. His clothes were the same as the day he disappeared, but they were tattered, soaked in something black that dripped onto the ground like ink. "Come with me," he said, his voice hollow, empty. Elena shook her head, stepping back. "You're not real." Daniel's grin widened. "Neither are you." The trees closed in. The last thing she heard was the wind whispering her name. The old radio in the attic had been silent for years. Dust-covered and forgotten, it sat among relics of the past, waiting. Until one night, it crackled to life. Ethan woke to the sound of static. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but the noise persisted, an eerie whispering beneath the white noise. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, straining to listen. Then, he heard it, a voice, "Help me." His skin prickled. The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. He climbed out of bed, heart pounding, and made his way toward the attic. The house was silent aside from the crackling transmission. The air was thick with dust, and each step on the creaky wooden stairs sent chills down his spine. He reached the attic door and hesitated. The voice was clearer now. "Please. Help me." Swallowing his fear, Ethan pushed open the door. The radio was glowing faintly, its dial turning on its own. The static faded, replaced by ragged breathing. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The breathing stopped. Silence stretched. Then, a response, "You know me." Ethan's stomach lurched. The voice. It was his grandfather's. His grandfather had vanished decades ago, disappearing without a trace. The police never found a body, no clues, no explanation. Just an empty house and a family left with unanswered questions. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the radio. "Grandpa?" A pause, then, "Find me." The room went cold. The attic light flickered, and a sudden gust of wind sent old papers flying. Ethan stumbled back, heart hammering against his ribs. The radio's dial spun wildly before the sound cut out completely. Silence. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the lifeless radio. He knew he should run, should forget what he had just heard, but he couldn't, somewhere, somehow. His grandfather was still out there, and he was waiting to be found. Mia never believed in rituals, at least not the ones whispered about in hushed tones at school. But when she found the torn pages of an old book hidden inside her grandmother's attic, curiosity got the better of her. The instructions were simple: light a single candle at midnight, stand in front of a mirror, and whisper the name of the departed 3 times. The book warned against doing it alone. The ritual was said to summon something. But it never said what. Mia's best friend, Lucas, scoffed at the idea. "It's just a game," he said. "People love scaring themselves for no reason." But Mia wasn't so sure. At precisely midnight, they gathered in front of the mirror in Mia's dimly lit bedroom. The candle flickered, casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. Mia's fingers trembled as she gripped the book. She took a deep breath and whispered the name, once. Twice, 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened. Lucas smirked, rolling his eyes. "See? I told you it's just." The candle flickered violently. The mirror fogged up as if someone were breathing on the other side. A shape began to form, indistinct at first, then growing clearer, a hand. Pressing against the glass, Mia gasped and stepped back. Lucas froze, his smirk vanishing. The hand dragged downward, leaving dark streaks as though something was trying to claw its way out. The air grew heavy, charged with an unnatural chill. A low whisper filled the room, but it wasn't coming from either of them. Then the lights went out. Mia screamed, fumbling for her phone. The room plunged into complete darkness. Save for the candle's flickering glow, a voice slithered through the air. Low. Hollow. Familiar. "Why did you call me?" The mirror shattered. Something was in the room with them now. Lucas grabbed Mia's arm. "Run." They bolted for the door, but the handle wouldn't budge. The shadows around them seemed to shift, stretch, and move. A slow, deliberate knock echoed from the mirror's remains. Knock, 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 then, silence. The room brightened as the power flickered back on. The candle was gone, the shattered mirror replaced with an unbroken reflection. But something was wrong. Mia turned to Lucas, her breath catching in her throat. The reflection in the mirror was still watching them. The old boarding school had long been abandoned, its halls silent except for the wind howling through shattered windows. Yet, for some reason, the single room at the end of the corridor remained locked. No one knew why, and the rumors surrounding it had only grown more chilling over time. When Alex and his friend stumbled upon the school during a weekend trip, they couldn't resist the urge to explore. The building was nothing but decaying wood and forgotten whispers, but that room, room 306, felt different. The air outside it was heavy, thick with something unseen. "Let's get it open," Sam suggested, brandishing a crowbar. Despite their unease, they all agreed. It took 3 strong pulls before the door gave way with a sickening creak. What lay beyond made their blood run cold. The room was untouched by time. A bed still neatly made, a desk covered in books, an old coat hanging behind the door. It was as if someone had just stepped out and never returned. But that wasn't what made them freeze. It was the message scrawled in deep, jagged scratches across the walls: "Don't let me out." A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them. The room dimmed as if the light itself was being swallowed. The air turned icy, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched seeped into their bones. Then, the whispering began, low at first, almost imperceptible. Then louder. Closer. Alex turned to the others, his voice barely above a breath. "We need to get out of here." But the door wouldn't budge. The whispering grew frantic, overlapping voices speaking in desperate, hushed tones. Something moved in the shadows, a presence taking shape. A figure. Eyes hollow, mouth twisted in a silent scream. Sam banged against the door. "Help! Let us out!" The scratching on the walls deepened, new words forming before their very eyes. "You let me out." The room erupted in chaos. The figure lunged. The lights flickered violently. Hands, cold, unseen, grasped at their clothes, pulling, dragging, then, darkness. When the sun rose, the building stood as it always had, abandoned and forgotten. The door to room 306 was locked once more. And Alex and his friends were never seen again. The village of Black Hollow had always been different. Hidden deep within an ancient forest, it was surrounded by mist that never lifted, no matter the season. The villagers spoke in hushed whispers about a particular clearing beyond the hills, a place no one dared to approach, the gateway to the other side. Legends told of an ancient ritual that had gone wrong centuries ago. It was said that the villagers had attempted to summon the spirits of their ancestors, but instead, they had opened a portal to a place they were never meant to reach. Ever since, the gateway had remained, a void of swirling darkness, barely visible through the thick fog, calling out to those who dared to listen. Nathan, an outsider, had never believed in ghost stories. He was a historian researching forgotten villages when he arrived in Black Hollow. The warnings from the villagers did little to dissuade him. "You mustn't go near it," an old woman at the inn warned. "Those who cross the threshold, they don't come back." Curiosity got the better of him. On the night of the full moon, he set out with his camera and notebook, determined to uncover the truth. The journey through the dense forest was eerily silent, and the further he walked, the heavier the air became. A sense of unseen eyes watching his every move sent shivers down his spine. Then, he saw it, a circle of ancient stones, standing tall against the mist. And at its center, a shifting, pulsing void, its darkness alive with movement. A whispering wind swirled around him, carrying voices that were not his own. "Nathan." The voice was soft, yet it surrounded him from every direction. He felt a pull, an irresistible force urging him forward. His feet moved on their own, drawn toward the abyss. His heart pounded as shadows twisted and danced within the portal. Faces emerged, twisted, pleading, staring at him with hollow eyes. Then, a hand shot out, cold, unnatural fingers clamped around his wrist, pulling him toward the darkness. Panic surged through him. He struggled, but the force was too strong. Just as he felt himself slipping away, the old woman's voice rang in his ears, "Close your eyes. Turn back." With a final, desperate effort, he yanked himself free and stumbled backward. The wind howled, the figures in the void shrieked, and in an instant, the gateway collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but silence. Nathan lay there, gasping. The mist slowly retreated, revealing the morning light filtering through the trees. He had escaped. But as he stumbled back to the village, one thing became clear: the whispers had followed him back. Nathan never truly escaped the horrors of the gateway. The whispers followed him, creeping into his dreams and haunting his every waking moment. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision. And his reflection in the mirror sometimes did not mimic his movements. The village of Black Hollow had warned him, yet he had crossed the threshold, and now the price had to be paid. Determined to rid himself of the curse, Nathan sought out the oldest living villager, a man named Elias, who lived on the outskirts of Black Hollow. Elias had seen many outsiders come and go, but none had ever returned quite like Nathan. His eyes held sorrow when he listened to Nathan's story. "The gateway never fully closes," Elias murmured. "It clings to those who dare to touch it. The only way to break the curse is to return, before it consumes you entirely." Nathan felt the cold grip of dread tighten around his heart. Return? He had barely escaped with his life. But deep inside, he knew Elias spoke the truth. The whispers had grown louder, their voices more desperate. They were calling him back. With no other choice, he retraced his steps to the cursed clearing. The mist was thicker this time, the air heavy with the weight of unseen entities. The ancient stones stood like silent sentinels, and at the center, the darkness writhed, waiting. Nathan took a deep breath and stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed into the circle, the wind howled, and the voices surged in unison. "Return what was taken." They demanded. He didn't understand. He had taken nothing. But then, as the void pulsed, a memory surfaced. The night he had escaped, something had clung to his hand. A small, cold trinket, barely noticeable at the time, a ring, ancient and rusted, now burning against his skin, heart pounding. Nathan pulled the ring from his pocket and held it up. The shadows surged forward, and with a deafening scream, the void sucked it in. The ground trembled, and for a moment, he felt himself being pulled along with it. But then, silence, the mist thinned, the oppressive weight lifted, and the clearing was just that, a clearing. The gateway was gone. Nathan stumbled back, gasping for air. He had done it. He had broken the curse. As he walked away, he felt lighter, the whispers fading into nothingness. Yet, deep in the back of his mind, one thought lingered: some doors, once opened, can never truly be shut.